Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome to another live. Yes, we're here again today, and hopefully, we'll have more persons here on this live for this live conversation in the context of the Privy Council's ruling, where, the convictions for Vybz Kartel et al., were quashed, all right? And so we're quashed and we're here for this conversation. I am joined by Ruren. Hello, Ruren. Are you hearing me loud and clear?
Hearing you loud and clear. Hello, everyone. It's so good to be here. Interesting case ahead of us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fairly okay. I'm feeling better today, so happy to be here again. And as you enter in the chat, welcome, welcome. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Voices in Education. If you're a returning viewer, listener, subscriber, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. And we'll definitely love to hear from you in the chat, and we'll have the WhatsApp line open as well so that you can call in and share, and I'll share more about the calls then once we're ready for that. And please hit the like button, hit the share button, and the subscription button. Tell a friend to tell another friend about the Voices in Education. And, in the context of this case, I guess lots have happened, leading up to this development from the UK Privy Council. And just to let you know that the Privy Council is Jamaica's final court of appeal. All right. It's the apex court, the top, 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 and that's the last you can go in terms of, I guess, seeking justice. And so in this context, this ruling is significant for us as Jamaicans in the context of our constitutional rights, right? And I always like to add though that, with rights, constitutional rights, they're not always absolute. All right. So that is something that we should bear in mind. But that does not mean that there isn't a system in place by that said constitution in terms of how, rights might not be guaranteed when you think about that in a demonstrably democratic, society, so in that sense, we want to look at rights, and not in the context of this case because we're not lawyers or judges. We're just basically going to look at the facts of the case. All right. So just to share that with you and to give you some background. So if you're here, please just hit the like button, hit the subscription button. All right. And again, as I mentioned there, rights are definitely important in the context of, our constitution, our Jamaican constitution. And that is definitely something that I know a lot of us we're zooming in on. And I guess one of that we're seeing from this trial is that, it's it's a right to a fair trial, I guess, in that sense. We can look at it from that perspective. All right. And so again, just to welcome you. We're just here waiting. And Ruren, is there anything that you're looking forward to in the context of this, conversation?
For sure, just to have that clarity in terms of that final court of, justice, or the highest level of justice as it relates to Jamaica, and what the ruling made by the Privy Council means, in regards to this case. Because, I think some persons might be of the view that, Vybz Kartel and his accomplice, or the other guys that were inside the prison here with him because of this situation, they will be walking free because of this ruling. But there are other outcomes that are
Well,
possible.
well, well,
So
well. Right now, I just let me just jump in a bit here. Right now, based on my understanding, so the ruling, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, right? They quashed the conviction. So all of I guess all five of them, I'm going to look at their names shortly just to share with you. It means that they're pretty much not guilty right now. So they're not convicts based on that. So pretty much you could put them back to a case now where you're accusing them of something now, because what the Privy Council has done, from my understanding, is to quash, to overturn that ruling to say, okay, they are guilty and responsible based on the juror misconduct, right? So right now, what is happening though is that the Privy Council, they sent back to the pretty much what they're doing is sending back to the Jamaican Court of Appeal to say, okay, we quash the conviction, but here what? If you believe that you have enough for a retrial, and you'll have to think about that in based on, I guess, a number of factors that they will have to consider. But what the Privy Council is saying, okay, this is definitely not fair. They have not gotten a fair trial. So we're quashing this conviction here for all men involved. And so we're sending this back to you for you to decide if you're going to order a retrial. So pretty much it's kind of like a 50-50, where they're not yet freed from prison because they will now have to wait on the Jamaican Court of Appeal to determine how they proceed. So I suspect, based on my little knowledge here, that what will happen is that as soon as the documents or whatever is communicated from the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council to the Jamaican Court of Appeal, then I would suspect that they're going to move expeditiously with this one, So what will happen is that I am assuming that both parties, so the defense attorneys, they will present arguments, and I'm going to say arguments against a retrial, and I guess possibly the prosecution, DPP, might be presenting arguments for a retrial, or the DPP could come and say, you know what, we're not going for a retrial. And then that would be done. And that's, so I feel that's where this one is going in that context. So I'm just going to come back over to you, Ruren.
Yeah, so yeah, just to continue, just clarity, finding that clarity in that regard as it relates to the Privy Council's ruling, and the possibility of what will happen as it relates to these gentlemen who have been locked away for some time now. So looking forward for all of that to be discussed. Looking forward to hearing from the viewers as well to hear their take on this whole matter, because it's always good to hear their voices and their perspective on this, and maybe even a prediction of what they presume will happen after when this case comes to a conclusion. So it's really interesting. It's an interesting topic, and it has been interesting from the very start of this case, and it has gone for a few years now, and the interest has now been rekindled. So I'm looking forward to a healthy discussion, and just to get a full some understanding of where different persons are as it relates to this case, and also what are the possibilities that may come from this case based on all that has happened. So that's
Yeah,
pretty much what
wonderful.
I'm looking forward to, Natasha Lee.
Wonderful, Ruren, wonderful. And, I believe a lot of persons, they're now more, thinking about their constitutional rights in that context. And again, just my understanding, not just of Jamaica and its constitution. So, for example, if I should look at the Canadian, Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that is pretty much a part of the Constitution Act of 1982, in terms of guarantee of rights and freedoms, they have section 1 there, which is definitely important in the context where, rights and freedoms, they are not absolute. And so I'm going to quote here: the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So again, rights can be limited, and in the Canadian context, there is the Oaks test. And I'm almost certain that I heard that coming up sometime at the Privy Council in that context. So some more research there needs to be done, perhaps on our part in the context of Jamaica. But just to give you an understanding that, we have, say, for example, freedom of expression, but it can be limited, as, mentioned there. It can be limited. All right. So welcome, welcome. If you're just tuning in, please remember to hit the like button, the share button, and the subscription button. And let me see in the chat here, not seeing any comments yet. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to navigate to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, and I'm just going to bring up the press summary and just to share some pointers from that summary with you guys. So I'm just going to stop sharing here and just to get to that page. And again, just to show you that this information is definitely accessible. And this is what I want you to do the research for yourself so you can see exactly what is happening. So as you can see here, Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, and you will see Sean Campbell there and three others, appellants versus the King, respondent number 2, Jamaica, and just you'll see the case ID, and you'll also see the issue here and the facts of the case. And I'm not going to get so much into the facts of the case, but just to let you know what is happening in this context here. All right, so so the case is regarding Sean Campbell, Adidja Palmer, Tahira Jones, and Andre St. John. As you can see, the parties there. And this page, it has, let me go right down just to show you. It has the full judgment there, and it has the press summary. And I'll go to the press summary just because it's going to be brief, and I'm just going to move on to the judgment, which is important here. All right, so let me just get my spotlight. All right, so you should be seeing that on screen, judgment, and I'm just going to start there. All right, so the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council has concluded that the appeals should be allowed and the appellant's convictions should be quashed on the ground of juror misconduct, and that the case should be remitted to the Court of Appeal of Jamaica to decide whether to order retrial of the appellants for the M of the deceased. Lord Lloyd Jones gives the unanimous judgment of the board. So unanimous. And let's go. Reason for the judgment. And the first issue, which is pretty much what they dealt with, because you will notice that issue number 2 and 3, by virtue of issue number 1 being so overwhelming, where that alone in itself led to the judges there from the Privy Council, 5 of them, coming to this, decision. They were like 2 and 3. We don't necessarily need to, I guess, give so much detail, but let's go. So juror misconduct. The board has considerable sympathy with the dilemma faced by the trial judge on the final day of a long and complex trial following the allegations of bribery. He had either to continue with the 11 remaining jurors or to discharge the jury. Despite this, the board considers that the approach taken by the judge was a material irregularity in the course of the trial, which makes it necessary to quash the convictions. This is for 3 reasons. First, the direction to the jury on the final day was inadequate to save the situation. The judge simply reminded the jury that they had sworn or affirmed that they would return verdicts in accordance with the evidence they had heard in court. The judge did not refer to the alleged bribery, of which, if the allegations were true, the jurors were already aware. All right, let's move on to the second reason, all right, for this judgment. The trial continued with the allegedly corrupt juror serving as one of its 11 members. In the board's view, there should have been no question of allowing juror X to continue to serve on the jury. Allowing juror X to remain on the jury is fatal to the safety of the convictions which followed. It was an infringement on the appellant's fundamental right to a fair hearing under the Jamaican Constitution. So this is significant there. It was an infringement of the appellant's fundamental right to a fair hearing under the Jamaican Constitution. And the final point here, the judge should have considered whether the remaining jurors might have become consciously or unconsciously prejudiced for or against one or more of the appellants as a result of juror X's behavior. For example, there was a danger that the attempted bribe could have made the other jurors overcompensate, consciously or unconsciously, if they assumed that the offer must have come from one of the appellants, and therefore they must be guilty. The judge took no account of this risk. And that is definitely a very valid point there because look at it, you're saying, Jura come and talk about, your bribe with a return, not guilty verdict. It must have come from one of them. That means I'm guilty, that's why I'm not try bribe, So think about it in that sense. All right. Let's just keep going now to this point here. The board is mindful of the very serious consequences which may flow from having to discharge a jury shortly before the end of a long and complex criminal trial. It is also very conscious of the danger of deliberate attempts to derail criminal trials by engineering situations in which it is necessary to discharge the jury. In England and Wales, there is legislation which allows a judge in certain situations to discharge a jury because of jury tampering and to continue the trial by judge alone. There is no such legislation in Jamaica. It follows that there will be occasions where, as in this case, a court will have no alternative but to discharge a jury and end the trial to protect the integrity of the system of trial by jury. And they said issue 2, timing of jury retirement, and issue 3, evidence obtained in breach of the charter. In view of its conclusion on the issue of juror misconduct, the board holds that it is not necessary to express a concluded view on these grounds of appeal. All right, and as you can see, the square brackets are pretty much the paragraphs from the judgment. So this is just the press summary. All right, so we can definitely see, the pages there, I believe, from 19 pages, I believe, from the overall, judgment from the court here. So this is pretty much, what had happened in this context here. And just to let you know that juror X was immediately arrested and was later convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice. All right, there was no evidence to connect his activities with the appellants. So just to let you know that that happened after the trial in Jamaica ended there with, Cartel and others. So just to give you a sense of what is happening here in this context. So the main reason here is issue number 1, juror misconduct. Welcome, welcome. If you're just tuning in, welcome. Please remember to hit the like button, the share button, and let us know. So Rurian, back to you. Having heard all of this now, do you have any questions, views?
Well, interesting information there. I am happy that, Jura X was dealt with, I guess. But that's just something that's sad. You don't want the jury to be, compromised in any way or form, and that says a lot about the jury that was selected. And if this case were to go back to the trial, I'm wondering about the authenticity of the jury, and that's something that I am contemplating. Will they get a fair trial, even if they get another trial?
And that's the big question for everyone. And based on what some of the defense lawyers are saying, they're saying you're not going to find 11 jurors who do not know anything about this case, because this case has been all over social media, all over in the media. And so to find persons who don't know anything about this case is just not going to happen right now. So I feel that they have a very strong point in that context. So we'll see how it goes. Is it a case where, and I've listened to the defense attorneys, they're saying that it's not a case where Jamaican judges are not competent and brilliant, and so I guess it was just that they just didn't get it right this time in the Court of Appeal with this one. And so they allowed it to go on to the Privy Council in terms of answering, these questions. And so in that context now, we're just waiting to see how things will unfold. But of course, we'll be here, with all the latest updates. The WhatsApp number is in the chat. So if you'd like to call in and, share your views, you can definitely call in and share. But I just want to let you know that this is a safe space where we share and, learn from each other. We don't bash anyone. We don't defame anyone, and we keep it real and respectful. All right. And again, you might know now in terms of YouTube and language. So we just keep it real respectful and maintain all the community guidelines here. So welcome, welcome. If you're just tuning in, please remember to hit the like button, the share button, and the subscription button. Mats Morgan, welcome. And Mats Morgan is saying just like, all right. So thank you so much, and would love to hear from you in the context, of what has happened. And pretty much as you can see on screen there, juror misconduct is the big issue here that pretty much led to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council quashing the convictions. All right. So welcome, welcome. Would love to hear from you as we continue to grow here in number. All right. So, Rurian, as I was saying there, you shared a very good point in the sense that, when we think about the possibility of a retrial, so we don't know if a retrial is going to happen. All right. So what the Privy Council is saying, they're sending this back to Jamaica's Court of Appeal for them to determine how they proceed, if they're going to order retrial or not. So I suspect that they're now waiting on some communication, which is, I mean, technology email that should be quick and fast, um, for the Court of Appeal to receive that, and then the defense attorneys, as well as the DPP, I guess they will submit their arguments in the context of, I am, well, logically, the defense is going to argue against a retrial, and it is likely, because I am not sure, the DPP might argue for a retrial, as well as the DPP might say, you know what, we don't want to pursue this any further. I think that's also a possibility, and that would be based on, I guess, what they have in front of them in terms of the judgment and looking at the points in that, so. Ruren, I don't know. I'm coming back over to you.
Yeah, really interesting times ahead because the system in place has made that error in the first place as it relates to the trial, and that is why the Privy Council is saying, all right, due diligence wasn't followed, and pretty much saying, well, you better take care of business, Jamaica, take care of business. So that's that's kind of what is happening now. And you're with all the information that has been out in the media, social media and all regarding this case. I personally doubt that they would get a fair trial, regardless if they are guilty in terms of they had committed the crime, yes or no. They are not going to be given a fair trial because persons have been skewed as it relates to what has happened based on the information out there. In essence, I'm saying that because of all the evidence that was out there in the public sphere, most persons have made their decisions already, saying that well they have been they should be free or they should be convicted. So it's going to be a tough one, and there must be some sort of accountability coming from the Jamaica justice system too. Who will take responsibility for the errors that were made, and how are they going to proceed in terms of you know, ensuring that something like this does not happen again. So, lots of questions, will come from this one. Many persons will have a say on this one. And, I hope at the end of this all that justice will be served. But, it's a complex situation, I would say in which the Jamaica justice system has found themselves. Because as you rightly alluded to earlier, in the case of a retrial, will they be able to find jurors that are, not skewed by the information out there? Um, that whole leg of it is going to be really hard. So, Natasha Lee, I think this problem is a little bit bigger than me. So I'm passing it back over to you to see what you can knock off this problem. But yeah,
Ah, nice. I don't know. I think it's bigger than us, but you mentioned some points there in the context of, and I want to say that justice delayed is justice denied also, and everyone has that right to a fair hearing under the Jamaican Constitution. And I feel that that is something big and huge for us, that the Privy Council is saying that you don't just, infringe on someone's right, like that, a constitutional right. But as I mentioned earlier there, by virtue of just reading, section 1 from the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, just to let you know that rights are not always absolute, right? And so in that sense though, if, for example, the government of Canada is going to infringe on a right, a charter right or freedom, then there is this Oaks test, and I believe I heard that coming out while I believe, was sharing his part when he was sharing to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. I believe he mentioned the Oaks test. And so in that sense, it's telling us as citizens that we need to understand our constitutional rights and also the responsibilities that come with those rights as well, because sometimes we feel that we have rights, but there are also responsibilities. Virgil, welcome, welcome. How are you doing? Welcome, welcome, guys. If you'd like to call and share, the WhatsApp number is pinned there in the chat. So WhatsApp call only. Would love to hear from you. And again, we keep it real and respectful. We don't bash or defame anyone. All right. So you also brought up another significant, point there, Rurian, in the context of what will happen in terms of the future. And I just wanted to add to that that my understanding is that the Jury Act is now being reviewed by, legislators. And so that is something good. Is it that they're going to dismiss, trial by jury? Perhaps not, and perhaps they should not. But maybe that part where, the Privy Council mentioned, and I'm just going to try and find it here, that I believe this is it, in England and Wales, there is legislation which allows a judge in certain situations to discharge a jury because of tampering and continue the trial by judge alone. There is no such legislation in Jamaica. So I'm wondering if this is something that our legislators will consider given this, outcome, if they will consider that, because in the context, my understanding in the context of that trial, that you had to have 11, right, jurors. So that is why I guess the trial judge did not dismiss or that juror asked that juror to leave, because if he had done that they would be 10, and that would not allow in terms of moving forward the case. They had to have 11. So I guess in that sense, having gone, those long days, and the time, I believe it was about 64 days in terms of that, trial there, the judge decided that, I'm going to remind you about, the oath, I guess, in the context of, looking at the evidence. So, you know, and I'm just bringing that up, right? So here, the judge simply reminded the jury that they had sworn or affirmed that they would return verdicts in accordance with the evidence they had heard in court. The judge did not refer to the alleged bribery, of which, if the allegations were true, the jurors were already aware. And so, in that context, what the Privy Council is saying here, that's not good. But what they're saying too is that, Jamaica, we trust you to do the right decision now that we have overturned, these convictions. So the men are no longer guilty, but there is still a process, so they cannot be freed just yet. There is a process, so we have to wait until the communication is made between the UK Privy Council and the Jamaica Court of Appeal. And I guess they will try to move expeditiously in terms of getting submissions from both parties, so the defense and the prosecution, in terms of how they're going to move forward. And again, I am assuming, and this is a logical assumption, that the defense attorneys, they're going to argue against a retrial, right? But it is likely that the prosecutors, the DPP, they might argue for the retrial, but the DPP could perhaps come, the prosecution could perhaps come and say, listen, we are not going to move forward with a retrial or something to that nature, and perhaps things, might go differently. So we'll wait to see what happens in that context, but for sure we'll definitely have, the updates here for you. Welcome, welcome. If you're just tuning in, hit the like button, guys, hit the share button and the subscription button. All right. And would love to hear from you. Would definitely love to hear from you. The WhatsApp number is right there in the chat. All right. And there is also a big question now in the context of this ruling. Should Jamaica remain with the Privy Council as their final court, or should we move move over to the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ? So that's a big question there, Rurian. Should we make the Caribbean Court of Justice our final court? or should we stay with the UK Privy Council? Like, I'm
Well,
coming over to you, Ruren, with this one.
oh boy, that's another tough one. But you know, what I loved about this case is that the fact that the Privy Council was there as that overarching body that was able to dissect this case in such meaningful way to find out that, or to establish and underscore that, there were some discrepancies here and, you need to go and fix this. So in my own estimation, I love having that. That's something that it could be a case that without the Privy Council, things would have moved ahead with these guys. Their rights would be trampled up on, and just to have that body that seemingly in this case, have gone through all the evidence and the procedures and say, all right, hey, Jamaica, you need to consider these things. We're turning over the convictions. Consider these things, and make your next step. So from
So,
that
Ruren,
standpoint, yeah,
just so, are you saying that if Jamaica's final court of appeal was the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, that they would not be able to return something of this
I
nature in the context
I
of a
am not
decision?
I'm not saying that, but
Okay.
based on what has happened with this case, I love the fact that there was the Privy Council. Would the Caribbean Court of Justice do the same thing? I am not sure. Possibly they would, but I'm speaking about what I have seen, and that's why based on what is happening now, I would tend to lean toward the Privy Council. What is your take on it?
Well, you know, it depends on how you're going to look at it. As you would say, we don't have that experience with the CCJ, so it would be something new. But I've listened to, persons in the legal profession, and they speak, very highly of the CCJ. Likewise, you have persons in the legal profession who they're more they favor the Privy Council. And one of the big arguments in terms of favoring the Privy Council is that they're saying the distance and not being close to the culture, so it gives, like there's just that distance. So the proximity is not there in the context of the pressure or media in terms of returning, a decision that is going to be fair, right? And so what they're saying with this case now is that, they were able to use the evidence presented before them and not excluding the noise, and they were able to come to this conclusion. And then you have on the other side where they're saying the CCJs in the Caribbean is so close to Jamaica, the likelihood of, things seeping across social media. I'm not sure. I don't have the experience. But then too, a strong argument, I guess, for the CCJ is that connection to culture and understanding culture where the UK, lords and ladies may not necessarily understand, which can be problematic in terms of handing handing out, what is fair in that sense. So I guess, lots there to think about in that context. But does the UK want us there? That's a question too. And, Jamaicans, I feel, if this should be put to a vote, like a referendum, I feel that they would want to stay with what they know. And while, there is also, the arguments of moving to a republic, and I guess lots of things there in that context to consider, but I feel that perhaps, Jamaicans would want to stay with what they know, the Privy Council. I don't know. Would you want to stay with the Privy Council or?
For
would you want to
me,
try something new? But then
you're
again, you
talking
like
about
mixed up.
me.
Yeah, talking about you.
Oh,
Yes.
I said it, you know. I definitely said I would lean toward what I know. But you know, this is the other thing too. You know, there are two arguments. You know, you're making mention on making a valid point of cultural sensitivity and connectivity. You know, from the Privy Council, but I am going to look on it from the other side. The fact that they're not so connected to the culture too means that they'll have to look on the case based on the evidence or the facts presented. And sometimes, you know, I think, you know, maybe that's even better. And probably that's what happened in this case as well. Because, you know, bias is created sometimes based on certain information that has been out there in the public domain and you know that you have experienced and you know that has skewed your views in a particular way. So you know, as you would say, the persons over there who are not so attached or directly linked to it might be able to give you a better judgment on certain situations. So I would definitely say stay with the Privy Council as long as they want us there. And you know, this case is one that would be, you know, used as a benchmark because, you know, they looked through the evidence and all the information presented and said, you know, the rights were trampled upon and you need to go at this again. And that's what I loved about their ruling.
Awesome. Thank you. Arctic Fire, greetings to you and big up yourself. Welcome, welcome. So, Ruren, I like that point and I'm going to counter because, we're trying to educate persons here and we're also trying to provide a balanced space where, you have some information that you can work with for yourselves. So, if I were to ask you this question, Ruren, when you think about, the average citizen in Jamaica, right?
Yeah.
And can the average citizen go to the Privy Council to seek justice? It is very costly. And when you think about a poor man who perhaps is in this situation like those, gentlemen there, is it a case where if they don't have the financial in terms of going there, and so one of the big arguments in terms of the CCJ was that not that it's going to be cheap, but the cost is going to be far less than what is required to go to the Privy Council. So I guess it's more accessible in that context. That was one of the big arguments in terms of making an argument for the CCJ. Because when you think about the Privy Council, just think about, you need lawyers here, lawyers there, and you think about what does this mean? Because when we get these information and judgments, right, we have to think about the average Jamaican citizen. The average citizen can't afford this kind of justice. And does it mean that they got a fair trial? No, it just means that they can't afford. They don't have what it takes to move forward to get the justice that they need. So when we think about accessing justice, think about it, if you don't have your money, I guess that's where justice stops for you. And when we think about justice, we think about justice for the haves and the have nots. And you see sometimes that it looks differently for different sects of people in society. It's going to look far different for marginalized people, poor people, who are not able to access this kind of, justice going to the Privy Council. That's huge in terms of cost. And so I'm coming back over to you just to say I don't know what is the cost is like for the Privy Council apart from knowing that it's super expensive. And one of the big arguments for the CCJ is that it will be more accessible because, it's less in terms of the cost. So I'm still not sure if the average citizen will be able to afford the CCJ, but perhaps, might be in a better position. But just coming back over to you based on that, argument.
Okay, I understand, totally understand what you're saying, and you're saying that, the average person, the average Jamaican would not be able to, access the services of the Privy Council. And, I guess we could use this case as well to underscore your point. But, if we're working with average as well, would that same average person be able to access the CCJ? And then I'll get to the point of asking you the question, you know, with the fact that you're not able to access the possibility, let's not say fact, but the possibility that you won't be able to access either the CCJ or the Privy Council, then because of your financial situation, then I think it's pretty much null or void in that regard, because you won't be, if you are the average person, then you won't be able to. And if it's a case where it's the person who are convicted or they are on trial, who are able to access it because of their financial situation, then it means that you should give them the best, or you want them to get the best. I'm not sure if best is the most appropriate word to use here, because, I haven't had a lot of experience with the CCJ. But I am thinking that based on, what has happened in this high profile case that has been around for a while and has been widely broadcast on social media, all the media houses all around the world, pretty much has had a little bite at this case. I am thinking that they did an awesome job of going through the information and producing that, as I said, finding that these men, their rights were, impeded. So I'm thinking that's the best way forward. That's a good, if the CCJ can, come up with something similar to that or same or even better than that in terms of, it would be a good place to venture as well. But, as I say, what you know, stick with the good that you know, and that's why I would be over here. Will the average Jamaican be able to access the CCJ or the Privy Council? I doubt that very much. But on that point, I am going to come back to this case as well. Why was there a need for the Privy Council? And that's the question that I am going to ask, and I'll answer a bit of it. Then there was a need for the Privy Council because persons were of the view that the case was not tried properly and there were discrepancies. And that's what was identified when the Privy Council went through. So, a big part of this, a big chunk of this is has to do with the Jamaican justice system and, ironing out some of the flaws that is there. So that's
Well,
how I would answer that.
in the con, all right. You see, a big part, I guess, in the context of law, and when you see laws or even policies, if you're aware of policies, comes back to interpretation, right? And then sometimes, you know, I'm getting a, oh, I thought I was getting a call here. And sometimes, in the context of interpretations, we hold different interpretations. And so that's where the challenge, comes in. And so in the context of, law, or that kind, when you go to court, it's more like an adversarial kind of a system, right? And so in that context, you're pretty much arguing your point, based on, the facts, the law, and interpretation of what this means in that context. So I am going to assume while there was I guess I am not sure, but in that context, the judge, the trial judge, ought to have recognized that this should not have been allowed, right? And however it did, and it went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal, I guess, didn't do anything in that sense. And so, but the appeal to the Privy Council was allowed. And so the questions there, but in that context, again, interpretations. But what the Privy Council did here was pretty much to go to the juror misconduct and just pretty much say, this is it. We're not even going to spend much more time on the other aspects. Let's just look at this juror misconduct and take it for what it is. I don't know much about the CCJ either, Rory, and apart from what I've done in courses in terms of looking at arguments for Privy Council and, for and against Privy Council and CCJ. I know I did that in some course. And so, in that context, right, you talk about cost, but I would say if it is more likely for you to get to a final court, then if we're looking at just cost, then I guess it would be the CCJ. So it would be more likely to get there in the context of cost, right? And so again, I said it's just going to be a preference to people. And if it's what you're going to trust as opposed to what you don't know, then that's going to be up to people in that context, right? And again, just to let you know that in the context of what I am sharing here on screen, this is the media report, the media summary. So you can actually go to the website here. Let me just go back to show that to you because we love when you're able to access the information for yourself. All right, so it's right here. It's the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, and it tells you the name of the appellants. And the respondent here is the King, number 2, Jamaica. It gives you the facts here. And the appellants in this one, Sean Campbell, Adija Palmer, Kahira Jones, Andre St. John. All right. And so for appellants, the justices, Lord Reed, Lord Lloyd Jones, Lord Briggs, Lord Barrows, and Lady Simla. All right. So 5 there in terms of coming to the decision. And this is the full judgment here. All right. And this is the press summary that I was looking at. So let me just open the judgment. I believe it's 19 pages. All right, so if you wanted to read the full 19 pages, then you can definitely come here and it gives you every the details of the case, paragraph by paragraph, and I guess what each lord or lady wrote in the context of their decision there. So just to let you know that, this is here. Perhaps it was just one person who gave this, but it has the different paragraph numbers. So you can see there. So this is what I guess the lawyers would be going through. And just to get an understanding of, what is happening. So this will definitely have more details in the context. So if you're someone who really wants to get into this and what it means, this is definitely where, you'll find that information. So I think it's 19 pages. So Lord Lloyd Jones there. And I guess we're at the top again. Just to double check. Yeah, 19 pages. And that's the conclusion there, 64. For these reasons set out above, the board will humbly advise His Majesty that the appellant's convictions should be quashed and the question whether there should be a retrial should be remitted to the Court of Appeal, Jamaica. All right, so that's pretty much that for the judgment there, but here is the press summary that I've been, looking on here. So you can always go and have access to these documents. They're right there on site for you. So I guess, Rurian, just coming back over to you there to hear, views that you may have, if you have anything else to share. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but back to you.
Well, I'm listening to the information that you're sharing. Really good information. But as I said, we in any case you want justice to be served, and the system must be in place to get that done. I don't know how they are going to work on the system there in Jamaica, but this needs to be looked on seriously. And, as I said, this case has brought lots of, a focus on the Jamaican justice system. And, based on what you were saying and what I agreed with too, as it relates to not everybody being able to access, let's say the Privy Council, or might even access the CCJ if that were to be utilized. But the fact that this case was one of such profile that, the necessary funds was available to employ or to get the Privy Council involved. And this has, highlighted the areas that might need or will need to be fixed, and things that must be considered before certain decisions are made. Then, we can look on it from a positive standpoint in terms of the Jamaican justice system, so that they can, make the necessary amendments to laws and acts and so on, so that you know, cases coming forward, in the future will not go down, in history like this one has gone. So, in all fairness and in all, when you look on this case holistically, people made mistakes and along the way, and that's what got the Privy Council involved. And what we need to do is, the system just needs that, revamping, so that, these little areas can be fixed, so we don't have any, future occurrence of this magnitude.
Yeah, I get what
So
you're
yeah,
saying, which is important that I guess this case is going to be like a precedent setting case.
for sure.
Having gone to the final appellate court there for sure in the context of, juror misconduct, this is going to be very important, and also perhaps in the context of constitutional, rights. That is something that, I guess lawyers are going to cite for sure in terms of looking at, certain cases. And for sure, Jamaicans are going to learn from this, because one thing for sure, you're not going to know that something is
Vision.
wrong as judges and just keep doing it, right? So you have this bar now and say, okay, this is a standard that has reached to the final
I'm
court. And so,
talking with them. What's
Rurian,
that?
I'm still hearing you here, Rurian. Rurian,
Hello.
okay, are
Sorry
you?
about
I'm here.
that.
I was hearing you. Okay, I'm not. Okay. Were you wanting to say something else here? Perhaps not.
No,
And
no.
so in that context, just having, the bar, set there, they're able to use that as something to say, okay, this was interpreted in this way, so this is not right, or we can do this, we cannot do that. And so that is definitely important in terms of how we're looking at the law and, case law in this context, because case law is also definitely important in the context of how judges make their decisions as well. So while we have the legislation, judges also look at case law. So judge kind of like judge made laws to look at previous rulings in terms of helping them in terms of making decisions and current cases before them. And so, in the context of this is definitely going to be a defining moment, I believe, in the context of case law that will be very impactful on, I guess, the Jamaican justice system when you look at it from that perspective, in terms of how this one case can definitely, you know, impact, the future of other cases or, decisions. So, Rurian, I'm not sure if you have anything else you'd like to share there.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. This case will be precedent setting and very impactful on the justice systems around the world as well. And
Well,
mainly the one in
I don't know about the world, Rurian, but perhaps you can say maybe for Jamaica and those perhaps using the Privy Council. And maybe, yeah, I don't know about the world because not everybody goes to the Privy Council. So look at it
well,
from that
that's
perspective.
I
Yeah.
understand, yeah, but this is going to be a case that persons will pay keen attention to. And if there is any little gaps or any little thing that needs tweaking, I'm sure they will utilize that. And I'm hoping that that's one thing that would be done in the Jamaican context in order to, not have this situation happening again.
As I said, it can only be like a learning moment. So in terms of, what would they say now, jurisprudence, I guess. And in terms of, just moving forward, what I want to see now is what will happen after, this. So what Jamaica will do. And we talked about this case, right? We talked about from I was listening to the arguments being presented. I said to you, based on what I have heard and just pulling on my little knowledge, what did I say to you, Red? I'm
Yeah,
waiting
you
on Red.
predicted that the Privy Council would, send it back to Jamaica for that ruling. So that's pretty
Yeah,
much what you see.
and it's because, I am not the person wanting to come and speak. And because it's a legal matter, I don't want to come and talk. I want to come and talk when the information is out because I'm not into misleading people and it's a legal matter. So we allow the professionals to do their jobs, right? And so we leave it there. But when I heard, the submissions and I was listening to I said to her, and what's going to happen? You know, they're gonna send this back to Jamaica. They're gonna send this back, and they did that, and because I could see it coming back for a couple of reasons, and they did send it back, and in the context though that they have quashed the convictions for the men, and but still sending back to say okay. You should be competent enough to handle this. So now that we have done this part, seen that and highlighted to you that this juror misconduct is significant and prevented, the men from getting a fair trial, we're sending this back to you for you to consider whether or not you want to order a retrial. And so persons have been asking, what now? Are the men free? So this is my understanding of that. So in the context of, what is happening right now, there should be some communication from the Privy Council to the Jamaican Court of Appeal. And I guess thereafter, once that communication is made, some submissions will come from defense and I guess prosecution in this matter, I guess the DPP. And I am assuming, and it's a logical assumption, that the defense attorneys, they're going to argue against a retrial, right? And the prosecution might argue for the retrial, as well as there's a likelihood where the prosecution might not go any further in the context of wanting a retrial. And that is going to be resting on, factors. And one of the factors that, I shared was in the context of finding a jury that is not connected or aware of this case. It's going to be hard to do that, hard to find, a jury that is not, let's say contaminated there in brackets in the context of all these happenings, right? And so that is going to be, I guess, challenging. I'm not sure if it's going to be possible, but that's going to be, challenging there in that context, and so we're looking forward to see how this goes. Haven't seen any updates from the DPP's office in this context just yet, so I'm not sure if that office is going to share anything regarding this nature, but we'll definitely look forward to see, what will happen next. All right. And so, when you think about that too, the court will have to decide, is it going to be fair after so many years, for the accused, I guess, to get lawyers again, to go back through this process. And again, aspects in terms of the evidence were also being shared on social media as well, like being circulated. And so I don't know if they're going to find the jurors they need in terms of hearing that. And so that I feel is going to be something that are some factors that will be taken into consideration by both parties, so defense and prosecution, in the context of, what is happening here or what will happen in terms of moving forward. And so Jamaicans, the lesson here for us to see just with like the elections and just trying to understand the process, we need to understand these processes, and it is important too that these things are taught in schools. I know we do some rights and responsibilities, and I don't know how much persons understand their constitutional rights and what this means for you as a Jamaican citizen. And I'm going to, as a Jamaican citizen, and I'm going to also add that with rights come responsibilities, and rights are not always absolute. And, that is important to understand as well. But there should be a procedure. So I mentioned in Canada, they have the Oaks test, and I'm wondering if it's the same situation for Jamaica in that context, in terms of if your right is going to be infringed upon, then this is the procedure or the steps that will be followed in that context. So again, it is definitely important, right, for us to consider those, contexts as we move, forward as Jamaican citizens. What does this case mean for us in the context of rights? And for us to look at ourselves too and say, boy, if I did meet a situation, it could me afford to go to Privy Council? Or it could be a case where you say, well, me need to get myself not in a problem there, but but again, when we think about this, we want to think about the fact that, you know, justice and, having, that fundamental right to a fair trial is definitely important. Definitely important. Again, welcome if you're just tuning in. Please remember to hit the like button, the share button, and the subscription button. The WhatsApp number is in the chat there. It's pinned in the chat. If you'd like to give us a call, please do so. I'm just going to put that up on screen because I feel that when it is on screen there, then you're perhaps you're perhaps seeing it, quite nice and clear, and it makes you feel like you wanna call. So let me just get to that screen, and there you go. So you should be seeing that WhatsApp number on screen there. Give us a call. We would love to hear from you. All right. So would love to hear from you. Again, welcome. If you're just tuning in, welcome. Would definitely love to hear from you. Rurian, I'm not sure if you're here and like to share anything else with us. All right, not hearing from Rurian just yet. So let me just check the chat here to see if I'm missing any new comments. Doesn't seem like I'm missing any comments there. All right, so again, welcome. If you're just tuning in, please remember to hit the like button, the share button, and the subscription button. And if you're just joining us, all right, just to let you know that the Privy Council has overturned the convictions for Vybz Kartel. And I'm going to perhaps, forget some of the names. Vybz Kartel and others. All right, so in the context of what has happened, just to give you a sense based on my understanding here, in the context of, what has happened, is that it's not like they're free to leave prison right now. So my understanding is that, some documents should be communicated from the Privy Council to the Court of Appeal, and then at some point thereafter, we'll get some submissions from the defense and the prosecution. And my guess is that the logical assumption here is that the defense, they're going to argue against the retrial, and perhaps the prosecution may, might, ask for a retrial, as well as the prosecution may not, the prosecution may not move further with the case in that context. So that's a possibility. So the men, it's like a partial, I'll say, victory for them, but still they have to wait a bit more to see. And I guess after that part, in terms of the submission, and if they decide that they're going to go, say, for example, retrial, then I guess the lawyers, they may now, make bail application because they are no longer convicts, but I guess accused, if you want to say that, because they're going to be accused of something, because you'll be doing a retrial if it reaches that stage. So I guess at that point, then the lawyers, they will make submission for bail after you know they meet at the court of appeal and kind of get a sense of where they're going. If it is that it's not going any further, then they're free, 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 free. And I guess if the retrial is going to be what is going to happen, then I guess after that sets in motion at some point, the lawyers, they are perhaps going to ask for bail for them. But we'll see what happens in that context. Lex Veen, welcome, welcome. And Lex Venus say, love for you are on the ball. Thank you, Lex Venus. Rush, rush, welcome. Can they use the same evidence if there is I guess they're asking a retrial? I am not sure, but I guess they're going to look at the evidence that they have to see if it is overwhelming, where I don't know. I really don't know the process, and I don't want to mislead you in that sense. But we'll see what happens, and I always like to just wait so I can direct you to the source. I don't want to give you my opinion, but I have an opinion on that. But let us see what happens in that context. All right. Let me just check if I'm missing any calls here. Okay, not seeing that I'm missing any calls here. So again, if you're just tuning in, the WhatsApp number is pinned in the chat there. It is on the screen there as well. Would love to hear from you, so don't be afraid to give us a call. We just keep it real and respectful. All right. So welcome, welcome. If you're just tuning in, welcome. We're very close in terms of, wrapping up this conversation. So would love to hear from you. Would definitely love to hear from you. So don't be afraid to give us a call. And one of the questions, as we were sharing earlier, that came up too in this context is if Jamaicans are going to just want to stay with the Privy Council as their final court, as opposed to considering the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, as their final court of appeal as well. So would love to hear from you in the chat in this context as well. Would you want to just stay with the Privy Council, or do you believe that, we can still go to the Caribbean Court of Justice, for our final, court there? Would love to hear from you in that context as well in the chat. And I'm just seeing here, let me see if I can get this information up just to share with you. And this is from Radio Jamaica News. And this looks like Bert Samuels is criticizing the Privy Council for ignoring some issues filed in Cartel's appeal. And by the way, I believe Bert Samuel is a strong supporter of the CCJ. And they're saying that attorney at law Bert Samuels has criticized the UK-based Judicial Committee of the Privy Council for failing to address certain key issues in the appeal filed by entertainer Adidja Vybz Kartel Palmer and three other men. The court on Thursday quashed the convictions of the men for the 2011 happening of Clive Lizard Williams due to juror misconduct and sent the matter back to Jamaica's Court of Appeal to determine whether there should be a retrial. Mr. Samuels, who was a guest Friday on the morning agenda on 4106 FM, said the Privy Council should have done a better job based on several complaints that were made in the appeal, including the issues of breaches of the Charter of Rights in relation to telecommunications evidence used against the men. And this is what he said here. I don't think that we should encourage misconduct on the part of law enforcement officers, that they are encouraged to say, I don't have to follow the rules. I can just go into your cell phone, take out the information, and remember, with respect to these cell phones, there is evidence of tampering. A police officer agreed that it was kept in a place which wasn't locked, and phone calls were being made on that instrument and text messages being sent on the phone that is allegedly belonging to one of the accused. That must have been something the court should have been looking at, he argued. Mr. Samuels, who represents entertainer Sean Storm Campbell in the case, said Jamaicans go to the highest court, the Privy Council, for guidance and for judges to be guided on how to deal with matters. And this is what he said again. They should have made several fair hearings conclusions, but they only dealt with the tainted juror, and we're disappointed because, we have put so much material before the Privy Council. The, the brief to the Privy Council was in excess of 9,000 pages. So we think that there was an element of disservice to the growth of jurisprudence in Jamaica because they only came down in a very narrow but important point that the jury issue was not handled properly. Mr. Samuels complained. So that's Mr. Samuels there in terms of, complaining that the Privy Council should have made some more decisions in the context of what they have, submitted. And they said they submitted what, 9,000 pages, right? And so in that context, they were expecting to hear more in terms of fair hearing, in terms of conclusions in that context. And so they believe that not the Privy Council taking, I guess, a rather narrow but, important approach was a disservice in the context of, the growth of jurisprudence in Jamaica. All right. And so that Bert Samuels there is saying, listen, that should have been those other issues that we brought to you. You should have dealt with it. I mean, it is important because the juror misconduct, yes, that is significant, but there are still some other issues that perhaps you should have taken the time to address to let us know that, hey, this is wrong, this is not, or, in that context. So we we hear that for sure. We hear that for sure. So again, welcome. If you're just tuning in, welcome. Roll call. Who is here? Not sure who is there. The chat is pretty quiet right now. So just doing a quick roll call to get an understanding of who is here and who is not. So, all right. So we're about to close this conversation off. We're about to close this one off for sure. So I'm just looking to see if I'm getting any final, comments in the chat. So I'm just looking to see if any new comments are coming in the chat. Again, welcome, welcome. And I am just wondering too, if the DPP, and I guess she's there, I guess perhaps looking at possibilities in the context of the ruling from the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. So this is going to be something that I am going to look out for in the context of, just hearing from the DPP and how, that office is going to proceed in the context of this ruling. So for sure, would love to hear from the DPP just to have a sense, of, what is happening. All right, so if you're just tuning in, I shared information from the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. So I went directly to their website so that you can actually go there to access this information because that is what we want to share. Knowledge is power. So you can go there and read for yourself, see for yourself. All right, that information is there. And just kind of give you an understanding of what that ruling means based on our little breakdown in the context of the four men in this trial, all right, or in what has happened. And so we're just here to break it down for you and to direct you to the source or the sources so that you can see for yourselves and read it and ask critical questions, ask yourself questions. And this is what I like. And the next thing that I want to bring up, why is it that Jamaica cannot stream, court hearings? You see, like how, the Privy Council, they have their website where you can go and watch, public. Why is it that Jamaica is not doing that? Because, similar to how we talk about the elections in terms of having access to the results, people need to see how a court system operates so you can watch what is happening. These things are public as opposed to having somebody just come in and directing the information to you or telling you. So it's coming through different, lenses or, interpretations. And so why is it Jamaica cannot have that? Can we do that, Jamaica? Mr. Prime Minister, can we get that done? Talking to the judiciary now, can we get that done? What is stopping us from giving, citizens access to, what is happening in the court? Would love to have that access. We want that information. That is necessary, I feel, in this context. And we can definitely ask for that as citizens of Jamaica for sure. That would be important, I feel. That would be definitely important. All right. Who is still here? I'm just doing a quick, a quick, roll call. Who is still here? So I'm just checking up to the time. Who is still here? So just welcome, welcome. All right, guys. So again, I was just doing a little summary in terms of our breakdown of the information that was shared by the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. So what they did pretty much was to overturn the convictions for the four men, so including Vybz Kartel Blair, and based on our understanding, this does not mean that the men are going to walk free now, right now, because the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council also, sent back the case to Jamaica for the Jamaican Court of Appeal to decide whether or not they do a retrial. All right. So because of that, there's a little wait right now in terms of how, things are going to go. So in that context, right, the men are no longer convicts because their convictions have been overturned. But yes, they're still in prison, but they're more like accused now. Yes, so that they're accusing them of it now, so you can put them there. So they're no longer convicts. And so my understanding is that after the UK Privy Council communicates with the Jamaica Court of Appeal, then I guess the next step would be the defense and the prosecution, submitting their arguments. And logically, the prosecution, they're going to argue against the retrial if it reaches to that point where the prosecution wants a retrial. But it is likely to that the prosecution might not want to do a retrial. And if that's the case, then the men are going to go free, I guess, if there is no retrial, right? And so we're here and we'll definitely provide you with the updates as they come along. All right, so stick and stay with us. Remember to hit the like button, the share button, and the subscription button. And also touch that bell, tap the bell, turn on your post notification so that you do not miss any updates from this channel. All right. All right. So, again, thank you so much for tuning in. All right. I'm just checking one last time in the chat. Hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscription button. All right. And ensure that you take care of yourself, exercise self-care. That is definitely, definitely important. All right. And blessings and love, everyone. Blessings and love. I'll see you in the next live. I'm just going to play some music here and then I'll sign out of this one. So take care and see you in the next live, everyone. Blessings and love. Bye for now.